even worse.
We'll break down what's in the Senate's bill and what it means for you with Tom Price, the head of Health and Human Services. Then, with opposition from within the Republican Party, can the bill actually pass?
The intention is not to take down the bill. The intention is to make the bill better.
I want to get to yes. And the way to get to yes is fix the underlying problems.
We'll discuss the battle ahead with the number 2 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin, and Republican Senator and Dr. John Barrasso, who helped craft the plan. Plus, the president questioned special counsel Robert Mueller's ability to be impartial.
He's very, very good friends with Comey, which is very bothersome.
We'll ask our Sunday panel if Mueller needs to recuse himself from this investigation. All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Republicans have continued making headway on their pledge to overhaul the nation's health care system as an Obamacare replacement was unveiled in the Senate this week. And as Majority Leader Mitch McConnell pushes to bring the bill to the floor for a vote, several of his fellow Republicans have come out in opposition to it. This hour, we'll look at the battle ahead in the Senate with Democrat Dick Durbin and Republican John Barrasso. But first, joining us to discuss the bill, Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price. Mr. Secretary, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning. Thanks, Britt. Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Glad to have you. What is in this bill for an average family worried about the cost of health care and wondering if they're going to be able to get or keep their coverage? Why should they care about this bill? Why should they want this bill?
Yeah, I think the important thing to appreciate is that where we're headed right now is in the wrong direction. We've got premiums increasing, deductibles increasing, where folks can't afford the deductible, so they can't get care. You've heard just this past week more insurers announcing that they're not going to be able to provide coverage in 2018. So this bill would provide market stability, make it so that insurance companies can come back into the market and provide, offer coverage for individuals. It would make it so that there are insurance reforms so that individuals have more choices. Does away with the mandate so you aren't forced to buy something that the government wants you to purchase or says you've got to purchase. You get the choice as individuals across this land to be able to purchase the kind of coverage that's right for you and your family. And then in the Medicaid system, what we do is say to states, you need the flexibility to be able to provide the kind of coverage that you think is most appropriate for your constituents, for your population, instead of a top-down Washington knows best model. So it's significant reform. It's a move in a much better direction because it is a patient-centered move where patients and families and doctors will be making decisions, not Washington, D.C.
Let me ask you a question that was sent to us by a viewer. Chris Buston is his name, and he writes, does the Senate bill address those Americans who fall within the, quote, coverage gap between Medicaid and Obamacare? What about that, Mr. Secretary?
Yeah, precisely. In fact, it does a much better job. Remembering right now, Britt, there are 28 million Americans who are uninsured. 28 million Americans who don't have insurance. 6.5 million of them have said that have been forced to pay $3 billion in taxes, in penalties, for the privilege, for the right of not purchasing what the government says they've got to buy. So what the Senate bill does is say every single individual between up to 350% of the poverty level ought to be able to have some type of tax credit that will allow them then to purchase the kind of coverage that they want. And it's a tax credit or a refundable tax credit or advanceable, so that nobody will fall through the cracks. Nobody will have the rug pulled out from under them. We want a seamless transition for those that are moving from either Medicaid to the individual market or Medicaid to the employer-sponsored market so that individuals are able to maintain the kind of coverage that they want for themselves.
The Senate bill, which is similar in many respects to the House bill, was scored by the CBO as leaving, 20-some million more uninsured over a period of time than present law would foresee. What is your response to that criticism that it just leaves too many people out?
Yeah, two major points to this. One is that the Congressional Budget Office does a pretty good job usually of saying what something's going to cost. They've been woefully inadequate in being able to predict what kind of coverage. For example, they said, the Congressional Budget Office said that right now Obamacare would cover about 23 or 24 million people. In fact, it's about 10 million people. So they're off by a significant factor, and we believe that they're off by a huge factor here as well because they don't give any credit for individuals purchasing some some type of insurance that the CBO says isn't credible insurance. Second point is that in terms of the entire plan, the bill isn't the entire plan. The kinds of things that we're doing at the Department of Health and Human Services to make certain that individuals across this land have the opportunity, again, to purchase the kind of coverage that they want for themselves, not that the government forces them to buy, to bring market stability so prices come down, to make it so the deductibles aren't so high that you have a health insurance card but you don't have care. So in its entirety, we believe that we will get more individuals covered than are covered right now.
Well, interesting to see what the CBO says about that. But let me ask you this question. What do you say to Senator Heller of Nevada, who came out this week and said he can't support the bill in its present form because over time the Medicaid changes you're making will mean fewer people are able to afford coverage and that are now getting it or would be getting it through Medicaid? What do you say to him?
Yeah, I say that Medicaid isn't the only vehicle to be able to purchase coverage or be able to have coverage. The goal of the Senate plan, the goal of the President's plan, and he's adamant about this. He wants to make certain that every single American has access to the kind of coverage that they want. But the plan is to make it so that if individuals aren't eligible for Medicaid, that again there's that seamless transition to the individual market, and that market is more robust because of the kinds of changes within the Senate bill and other kinds of things that we're doing at the department to provide greater choices and lower costs within that individual and small group market. So our goal is if you're not eligible for Medicaid in this new construct, that you're eligible for the kind of coverage and have the kind of subsidy, the kind of assistance, financial assistance, to be able to purchase that coverage.
Let me come at you then from a somewhat different angle, the angle where Rand Paul is coming from, and he's not alone in this. There are members of the House who feel the same way, and perhaps others in the Senate as well. His point is you don't repeal and replace Obamacare here. You leave most of its key elements in place. You know, the coverage for pre-existing conditions, that young people can stay on their parents' insurance plan until age 26. The subsidies, which are a key part of Obamacare, are all left largely intact here. That this doesn't, in fact, do the job of repealing and replacing Obamacare. What do you say?
Yeah, what I tell them is look, the penalties go away. Right now, the government's forcing people to buy coverage. In fact, again, there are 6.5 million folks who are paying the $3 billion for the privilege of not purchasing that coverage. Those go away, so that's not Obamacare. Medicaid actually becomes much more flexible for states so that they can design a program that works for their citizens as opposed to Washington telling the states what they want. That's not Obamacare. The taxes that are in place solely to build a huge government-run health care system, those go away, so that's not Obamacare. So what we're trying to do here, admittedly, is to thread a needle and make it so that, as the President says, every single American needs to be able to have access to the kind of coverage that they want. Ensuring that pre-existing illnesses are covered, ensuring that there are no lifetime caps, ensuring that individuals, again, have the kind of choices that are necessary so that the system is responsive to people, to patients, not responsive to government.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned that the penalties for not having, the tax penalty for not having insurance goes away, which suggests that that people, since pre-existing conditions are covered, anybody who wants to can simply wait until they're sick to buy coverage and then be covered. That obviously is an issue, since you need healthy people in the program to pay for the coverage for people who are ill. What is the incentive in this bill, if any, to get people to go ahead and purchase coverage when they are young and they feel healthy and it's a rational choice not to have it?
Well, it's a great question, and the question really is, how do you get young, healthy people to purchase coverage so that the pool includes them? And the answer is you provide the insurance companies the opportunity to sell something to young, healthy people that they want to buy. Not that they say, the 6.5 million folks out there say, we'll write a check so that we don't have to buy what Washington tells us to buy. You provide the kind of choices, the array of choices. Before, individuals were able to purchase the kind of coverage that was actually responsive to them, fit their system, fit their lifestyle, fit their situation in life. That's the way that you get folks to buy coverage, and it's providing coverage that they want to purchase as opposed to what the government dictates to them they've got to buy.
Senator, let me turn to the question, obviously, that everybody's going to be thinking about this weekend, and which we'll take up presently with Senators Durbin and Barrasso, which is this. Since the plan was brought forward this week, 5 Republican senators have announced their misgivings. There may be 4 or so others who share those misgivings for various reasons. So you're going to be, you can only afford to lose 2. You're down 5 and maybe more. How do you get from where you are now to the 50 votes you need?
Yeah, if you listen to what those 5 said, and we've talked with every one of them, and I know that the Senate leadership have as well, and the president's talking with folks. If you talk to them, what they will tell you, and I think they were part of your clips before, is that we want to be able to support this bill. We simply believe that it can be made better in a certain way, and so those conversations are ongoing. That's the nature of the legislative process,
yeah, I understand.
And that's what we'll be working through this week.
Well, I mean, but they're coming at you from both sides. You got, Ted Cruz and Rand Paul who are worried about it for one set of reasons, and you got, the other senators who have come out with and shown their misgivings about it for another set of reasons. Aren't you in danger, if you please one group, of losing others and so on? I mean, aren't you got a pretty delicate little structure here that you risk upsetting when you start adjusting it to pick up votes?
Well, you've identified the challenge. There's no doubt about it. It's a thin needle to thread. Sadly, as the president has talked about, it'd be wonderful to have some Democrats come along and recognize that there are nearly 40% of our counties across this nation that will only have one issuer, insurance company, providing coverage. There are going to be counties across this country that won't have any insurance company providing coverage. You've got premiums going up, deductibles going up. Folks have that insurance card but no care. What do our friends on the other side of the aisle from a Republican Democrat perspective say to those challenges? Why aren't they coming to the table to help out? That's what the president
Mr. Secretary, we have one of their leaders coming up next, and I'll ask that very question. Sir, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Up next, Senators Dick Durbin and John Barrasso on where things stand in the battle over health care reform in the Senate. Stay with us. The pressure is now on Senate Republicans, who took a big step this week in their effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. But does that health care plan have the votes to pass? Joining us to discuss it from Springfield, Illinois, the Senate's number 2 Democrat, Dick Durbin. And here in Washington, Wyoming Senator Dr. John Barrasso, who helped craft the plan. First to you, Senator Durbin. Let me pick up where Secretary Price left off. Is there a single Democratic senator that you can identify who might vote for this plan?
No, not as written. And I will tell you 2 things that were omitted from your interview with Secretary Price. I asked him 10 days ago in a hearing before a committee, have you seen the Republican plan? Are you part of the discussion? He said, no, I haven't seen it at all. This is a man responsible for implementing it. So we are going to vote this week on changing the health care system in America without any public hearings, without the publication of a bill, without any discussion, debate, and then we have this expedited amendment process. It is really disgraceful to think that the Senate has reached this point.
I understand your procedural objections to the bill, but let's talk a little bit about what's in the measure, in the plan, as it was announced this week to the tune of, 142 pages or something. What would it take, in your judgment, to get some Democrats to come over and vote for this plan?
Take repeal off the table. And the other thing that wasn't mentioned in the earlier interview, what's driving this is not health care reform. What's driving this is a tax cut the Republicans insist on, of about $700 billion for the wealthiest people in America and pharmaceutical companies. That is what the Republicans had to put in the plan to make it work for Republicans, and then they took the money out of health care, out of Medicaid. And that's why we see 23 million Americans losing their health insurance. It's so those at the highest income categories can get a tax break. Take that off the table. Let's talk about repairing Affordable Care Act as it exists.
Senator Barrasso, let me bring you in here. What do you say to Senator Durbin's objections that this is basically not really health care reform or Obamacare repeal and replace, that this is a big tax cut for rich people?
Well, he's absolutely wrong. The crisis is getting worse. Obamacare is collapsing every day. I was at a hospital yesterday in Casper, Wyoming, talking to doctors, nurses, and patients. There is an urgency to act. We are down to one company providing insurance in Wyoming. The prices have skyrocketed. That's why we have to do something. And we need to do what the people are asking for, which is stabilize the insurance markets. Senator Durbin doesn't want to talk about the fact that in Illinois, they're way down the number of people even selling insurance, and prices are way up. That we want to eliminate the mandates that you have to buy a government-approved product. Get rid of all of the taxes, but focus on the fact that this is about health care for people who, many people in Wyoming lost it under Obamacare. They had insurance they liked and they could afford. The Democrats said, not good enough for us. It was good enough for them, and they could afford it.
Well, let me press you a little bit on Senator Durbin's point, which is that you repeal all the taxes that are in here. The tax cuts naturally, benefits tend to graduate to the people who pay more taxes, which is, of course, the more wealthy people. And that on the other side of this, over time, Medicaid funding will diminish. And therefore, the argument is made, this is repealing and replacing Obamacare on the backs of the poor. What do you say to that argument?
Obamacare raised taxes on every American who uses health care in America. They put it on over-the-counter medicines, prescription medicines, medical devices, which are so often used for the disabled population the most. And so it's been very cruel taxing on Obamacare. But that's what he wants to talk about. We want to eliminate all of them. They put taxes on people that buy health insurance. So anybody using the health insurance, the cost of that has actually gone up by the taxes under Obamacare. With regard to Medicaid, I'm a doctor who took care of every Medicaid patient that there was that came to me in Casper, Wyoming. As a state legislator, I always believed we could do a much better job if we could just have control of that money and actually help more people with the same amount of money without all the Washington.
You mean local control?
Local control, which is what I saw in the Wyoming State Senate. But the amount of dollars going to Medicaid from today on out continues to go up year after year after year. So when Senator Durbin refers to a cut, only in Washington is giving more each year, something you could see of a cut if it doesn't go up as fast as he would like it to go up. It goes up every year.
Let me turn back to you, Senator Durbin. There is a question about the growth in Medicaid spending and the fact that our budget problems are driven in huge part by the kind of entitlement program that Medicaid represents. And with its exponential growth, aren't we in a situation where something has to be done to curb the growth of Medicaid and perhaps other entitlement programs?
Brett, let me tell you, my friend John Barrasso, and he is my friend, spends a lot of time, we talk about Wyoming. Over the weekend, the head of the Wyoming Hospital Association came out against Senator Barrasso's bill, and the CEO of the Wyoming Medical Center said it's going to hurt everybody in Wyoming. Now, that's what's being said in his home state. As
She also said she didn't read the bill. Let me say a word. She also said she didn't read the bill. So she could read it first.
Well, because it's impossible to find, you couldn't find the bill until the very last minute.
Only 150 pages.
Most of it is tax cuts.
Senator,
but I want to say,
let me get back to my question about.
If I could respond on Medicaid.
Yeah, go ahead.
May I please?
Sure.
And I might say that the Republican governor of Wyoming would like to expand Medicaid, but the legislature won't let him. And the reason we need to expand it is to make sure that people who are currently working hard in low-paying jobs and have no medical benefits have an opportunity through Medicaid to have insurance for their families. Why do we have this increase, this dramatic increase in people on Medicaid? Because so many people are working hard every single day and don't have health insurance. Medicaid is their ticket to health insurance. And the Republicans have decided to put a cap on the amount of money that's going to be given to states, and Republican governors like the governor of Nevada, the governor of Ohio, the governor of Illinois have said this is a disaster for our states if you do it.
Senator, nowhere though in your answer in your comments do I hear an answer to the question of is not Medicaid expanding at an unsustainable rate, and does not something have to be done for budgetary reasons, long-term and short, to curb the growth of this program and others like it?
Brett, let me tell you what is expanding at an unsustainable rate, and that is the notion that people would not have health insurance under this Republican approach. Let's face the reality. Even if you don't have Medicaid, even if the Republicans are successful in cutting back on it, people get sick and go to the hospital. In a state like Kentucky, one of the largest expanses of Medicaid, if they eliminate the Medicaid funding, it'll be a 165% increase in Kentucky in uncompensated care. There's going to be medical care given to these people, the working poor and those who are struggling, and others will have to pay for it. The Republicans won't face that reality.
Senator Barrasso?
Well, Medicaid was set up for poor women, for children, and for people with disability. Obamacare used Medicaid as a dumping ground for able-bodied, working-aged individuals. There are ways to modify Medicaid. Mike Pence, vice president, when he was governor of Indiana, did a wonderful job of that with the local control that we are asking for all across the country. But the growth will continue for Medicaid. We need to do it in a responsible way. But to just talk about these things as being cuts, it's just not the case. And when they dumped all of these additional people onto Medicaid, it made it that much harder for the poor women, children, and people with disabilities to get the treatment they need, because now more and more doctors are saying, actually a third of doctors say, I just can't see any new Medicaid patients. So Obamacare actually made it worse for patients who were originally designed to be helped by Medicaid.
Senator Durbin?
I can tell you that this approach, the Republican approach, will devastate Medicaid. And you know who will be hurt? Rural hospitals in Wyoming and in Illinois. Ask your hospital association, Senator. My hospital association put out a statement over the weekend here in Illinois and said this is devastating. We're going to lose jobs in rural hospitals in Illinois. That's the Trump constituency that's going to be hurt by this approach on the Republican side. And secondly, we're going to see premiums go up dramatically, particularly those.
But they're going up dramatically now, aren't they, Senator? Aren't they going up dramatically now?
They're going up, but they're going up now. But I can tell you, it is a finite group of individual insurance marketplace people, 5 to 6% of the overall market. That's what we need to sit down and fix. Democrats and Republicans should work together to make the Affordable Care Act work for them. Not devastate Medicaid, not raise premiums.
Senator Barrasso?
Senator Durbin has no interest in working with the Republicans on this, but he should have seen the headline in the Chicago newspaper that said Obamacare rates a rate shock, another Obamacare rate shock. That's what's happened all across the country. Yeah. People are hurt by these incredible increases. This is a program that is collapsing.
Senator Durbin, let me just cite a couple of examples and let you respond to them. I think we have something we can put up on the screen on some of these premium increases. In the state of Maryland, Blue Cross Blue Shield up 52% 2018. And you can see New York, 49% Blue Cross Blue Shield. Cigna in Virginia, 45%. Anthem in Connecticut, 34%. Delaware, Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield up 34%. Those are pretty sharp increases, and those are just a sample. Senator, it seems to me that to complain that premiums may go up under this plan, it seems to me they're going up pretty seriously under the present situation, are they not?
The Congressional Budget Office, when they analyzed the House approach, which is similar to the Senate approach as we've seen it, has said that this is a stable insurance market and there's need, obviously, for us to work in the individual insurance marketplace with 5 or 6% of Americans who go there. But in the meantime, when you go to the insurance company executives and say, why are you pulling out of markets? Why are you raising premiums? They say the uncertainty in Washington since the arrival of President Trump, who from his first executive order has been undermining health insurance and the Affordable Care Act, cutting off the individual marketplace, which would expand insurance pools and bring premiums down, cutting off the assistance for those who need help and paying for premiums. These are the things that are sabotaging and undermining the Affordable Care Act. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim a death spiral while you're choking a system to death.
What about it, Senator Barrasso?
Obamacare has sabotaged the insurance market in the country to the point where now in half of the counties around the country, people are down to either 0, 1, or 2 choices. You have over 40 counties where no one is selling Obamacare insurance.
Senator, you've made the case pretty effectively that Obamacare is in trouble. I think you know, even Senator Durbin would not disagree that something needs to be done. The question now is, of course, whether you and your team of bill designers can find a way to bring over the senators you're going to need. You're down 5. You can only afford to lose 2. There may be others.
I worked with all of them. Every one of them is committed to a fundamental change away from Obamacare and central government control and into local control and patients making decisions. We're going to continue to work with each of them through the process. Every one of them has very good points that they're making. I want to work with all of them.
Yeah, but do you have the flexibility within the framework of the bill to fix it so that they'll go with you?
I believe we do. I believe we'll get it passed, and that's the only way we can fundamentally change away from Obamacare, get rid of all of the hated mandates and the taxes, and put Medicaid on a sustainable course long-term. Get down the cost of care and insurance.
Senator Barrasso, Senator Durbin, a very good debate. Thanks to both of you. Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to get their take on whether this Senate health care bill will even make it to a vote. Stay with us, please.
This bill that's currently in front of the United States Senate, not the answer. It's simply not the answer. And I'm announcing today that in this form I will not support it.
It's a very complicated situation from the standpoint you do something that's good for one group but bad for another. It's a very, very narrow path, but I think we're going to get there.
Well, you heard now in Nevada, Republican Senator Dean Heller there announcing he is not supporting this, in its current form at least, this Senate health care plan. And President Trump, of course, is saying optimistically that they'll get the votes. But will they? Now it's time for our Sunday group. The head of Heritage Action for America, Michael Needham. Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. Fox News national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin. And Josh Holmes, Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff and a Republican strategist. Let's start with this question. They're down 5. They can't afford to lose more than 2. There may be others waiting in the wings who may oppose this measure. What are the chances, Michael?
Well, it's going to be very tight, as you mentioned. There's 5, probably more like 7 or 9 senators who have concerns. I'm optimistic because I think those different camps are looking at different parts of the bill. The conservatives are looking at what's going on with the regulations, the ability to bring down premiums. Some of the moderates are looking at the Medicaid expansion. In a negotiating situation, when people want different things changed, there is a Pareto optimal. There is an outcome where people can, as the president said this morning, maybe not love the bill, but like it. And I think I'm optimistic that they'll get there.
Jen?
I thought it was notable that the president reached out to Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, a Democrat. It's clear that they're very concerned about the 5, and they don't believe that they can change Senator Rand Paul's mind or Senator Mike Lee's mind. That's 2. They can only afford to lose 2. So they are looking at Democrats that they can sway, but Senator Manchin has said that he will vote against the bill.
Well, Josh, you've been in the leadership operation over there on the Republican side. Do you think there's a hope in Hades that any Democrat will come over? Senator Durbin said he couldn't identify one to vote for this bill.
You know, I think this Democratic Party is not your grandfather's Democratic Party. I think they're going to oppose Donald Trump at every possible corner, no matter what, and basically no matter what the policy outcome is. But I share Michael's optimism. I think they're going to get there next week. I really do. If you look at the statements that the senators have made, they've had every opportunity to draw a hard line and say no, and they're leaving themselves some wiggle room, and I think they're having conversations over this weekend that hopefully will send that in the right direction.
Bob, your thoughts?
I think it's kind of a fantasy-based debate on all sides here, and I don't see how you put it together. I mean, people talk abstractly about Medicaid. That is the health insurance program for the poor, for the people who can't afford health insurance. And you now have a system where they're at least a proposal in the Senate of saying, hey, we'll take them off Medicaid and then they can buy insurance, but they don't have the money to do it. There's an absurdity in this.
It's kind of incredible, both in Senator Durbin's comments and Bob's. If the Democrat Party wants to become the party of Medicaid, I don't think it's going to have a lot of success in the 21st century. Medicaid was a program designed in the middle of the last century where health outcomes between people on Medicaid and the completely uninsured are exactly the same. Actually, on some procedures, you're more likely to die if you're on Medicaid than if you're uninsured. What's happened was that Medicaid was originally a very targeted program for certain vulnerable populations, people like the disabled, that Barack Obama then poured millions of able-bodied poor people onto the program, the able-bodied. What will happen at the end of this process, if you compare where was this country 8 years ago to where would this country be if this bill passed, is we'll be more compassionate, we'll be spending more money on vulnerable populations while not propping up a failing program from the middle of the last century. That's what a modern 21st century policy agenda looks like. If Bob and the Democrats want to be the party of Medicaid, let's take it to the elections.
Wait a minute. I mean, that's unfair. I'm saying there's a critique of Medicaid that can be made, and you made it, but to fix it this way when you've got tens of millions of people on it and say, now you can buy health insurance.
Well, hold on. Let me just interject. Isn't this the age-old story with entitlement programs, which is to say that once you put an entitlement program in place, people then turn to it and become dependent on it in a way they might not otherwise have done, and then you end up in the situation you're always in where you got this exploding costs, and people worried about losing it, and the result is you have this national debt through the roof, and you can never seem to take it away.
That's absolutely right. I mean, if you look at the way that healthcare has developed over the last 50 years in this country, it has taken a significant lurch to the left. And the reason it has is exactly what you just outlined, is that Democrats have an incremental way of getting to their ultimate goal, which is socialized, nationalized, single-payer system. So you create an entitlement program for the elderly, an entitlement program for the young, an entitlement program for the poor, and then ever expand eligibility for all three. And that's what we've got here today.
Jen?
Look at the numbers. There are 11 million more people on Medicaid since Obamacare was introduced. It's been a 30% rise in terms of those on Medicaid. If you look at the cost, last year the federal government spent $389 billion on Medicaid. In the next 10 years, that will go up to $650 billion. These numbers are staggering.
Yeah, unsustainable, perhaps.
It's perhaps unsustainable, but look at where the greatest pushback in terms of the Senate bill is coming from, and it's coming from Republican senators or governors who are up for re-election this year or next, because they know that they have hundreds of thousands of new Medicaid voters on the rolls who are going to lose that coverage, and they are very scared of that population.
All right, that raises this question, Michael. Let's address the politics of this. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that they cobble together a bill along the lines of somewhere between the House and Senate bills that do these things. Both do similar things with Medicaid. What are the political consequences in the 2018 midterms?
Well, I think that it depends whether the party is capable of making the compassionate case for what's going on. I mean, when you look at this, there was a cruel element of Barack Obama's Medicaid expansion that said the federal government is going to give more money to states for the able-bodied populations that they pass versus the populations that are more vulnerable, which caused many states to start ignoring or shifting their programs to care more about the able-bodied than the vulnerable. That's not compassionate. That's cruel, and I think that needs to be pulled back.
I understand. So what you're basically saying, though, is if they can make the right argument, they can avoid the political damage.
I think they can. I mean, I think the biggest threat that they have is that this is not a repeal bill. And so they've spent 8 years telling people that they're going to repeal Obamacare. It doesn't, and they're going to have problems on their right flank about that.
So they're going to, if I have this right, you got people on the right who think it doesn't do enough to repeal and replace Obamacare, and centrist Republicans who have centrist constituencies who think it's going to hurt too many people. How do you deal with that, Bob, politically?
But the resolution here is Senator McConnell, who can be the magician when it comes to putting something together to make a picture where the pieces in the puzzle don't fit. So maybe he's going to make it work.
Josh, your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's right. I mean, this is a delicate balance. It is an extremely delicate balance to get the right and the left of the party on the same page with no margin of error. But I think that this bill is there, and the alternative, just so we're clear, the alternative to 51 votes is Obamacare.
Yeah, I get that. Now, so what would be the consequences? So we've discussed the consequences of the bill passing, which look difficult, right, politically.
Almost impossible.
What about the consequences of not passing a bill?
Well, if they don't pass it, they're going to have to go back to their constituents in 2018 and explain. The Republicans are going to have to explain why they didn't do what they said they were going to do, repeal and replace. But I would point out that the Senate bill is rather clever because the Medicaid cuts come in 2021. That's after not only the 2018 elections, but also the 2020.
Okay, so let's boil this down to a simple question: which is the, just in raw political terms, but not getting into the substance, in political terms, which is worse, passing the bill politically or not passing it? Michael?
I think that politically and from a policy standpoint, the world is a better place if this bill passes than if it doesn't. There's still going to be a lot of work to be done.
I think that the Republicans will be better off if it doesn't pass and they can say that the Democrats were obstructionists and Washington doesn't work and they tried.
Josh?
Yeah, they have to pass it. I mean, this is a core campaign promise that has been made for the last 7 years. I think every Republican senator ought to look hard at that. And,
Bob?
This should pass.
Yeah, but again, this fantasy, there is a House bill that's passed that is different, and you've got to
different, though.
Yeah, well, but it's enough that it's something that has to be reconciled.
Okay, let's assume they get that done.
There's not a magic wand that fixes
So is it better to pass something or not?
Oh, I mean, who knows the future? We're protected from knowing
gentlemen, this is a courageous member of our panel who is willing to admit what we journalists hate to admit is we don't know. We got to take a break here, but when we come back, the president questions whether Robert Mueller can be impartial in his role as special counsel. Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about the White House's decision to hold some press briefings off camera? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.